Welcome to our WhyTry hosted webinar. My name is Jason Johnson here. In fact, I'll realize I got to update my webinar name. There we go. My name is Jason Johnson, representing the WhyTry organization, and fortunate to be able to moderate this panel today. We've got a really impressive group of panelists for our discussion, and I think a really important topic that we're going to be discussing today. Welcome those that are joining us live, and welcome as well to anybody that watches the recording of this after. Our plan is we're going to target going for about an hour, and a couple of notes before I introduce our panelists. I'm going to make the request, if you're on live with us, open up your chat box and make the adjustment where you type a message. Right above it says to, and then there's a little drop down arrow. If that does not say everyone, I'm going to politely ask that you adjust your setting there so that it says to everyone. That'll make it so that other people can see your comments, and I think that's helpful during the live section here. It allows other people to see what questions you may have, and then some of the comments and the exchange that happens in the chat historically on these has been really enriching as well. So go ahead and make that adjustment, and then just to do a quick test to make sure you've adjusted that well. After you've adjusted that in your settings, I want you to type an emoji into the chat that tells how your week has gone so far, which I know is a loaded question to ask on a Friday, but you know what? This is a safe place where we want we want people to feel comfortable to share. Put an emoji that tells how your week's gone so far in the in the chat. Lots of crazy eyes. I can empathize with that. Oh, fire! Nice. I love it. Okay, awesome. Thank you for engaging with me on that. Looks good. Looks like most everybody has their chat adjusted over so that we can all see comments. A few of you, it still has set to host and panelists. If you can make that adjustment, it's helpful. Otherwise, no stress at all. We're just grateful to have you on. So as I mentioned, my name is Jason Johnson. I represent the WhyTry organization, and we are the lucky group that gets to host these webinars. We've been doing these for over 2 years now. I've done about 70 of these, and it's been just a really rewarding experience for me personally to be able to be involved in these, but it's also turned into a really fun community where we try to discuss important topics that are relevant to typically the areas of education, mental health, kind of the intersection between the two, some of those, and then usually one of the common threads amongst our discussion, because it's kind of our organizational area of expertise, is the topic of resilience. So that will probably come up a little bit as well, I would anticipate. Organizationally, I represent the WhyTry organization. We are kind of experts in resilience. We've been around for about 20 years. We have some great resources and training available that all connects back to helping people teach the skills and the sources of resilience. And over our career, we've been able to become part of just this really important and beautiful community of educators and mental health providers throughout the country that has this webinar has kind of become an additional arm of. So today we're gonna get right into the good stuff. Our topic for today is insights for promoting positive student mental health, and I'm really excited for the way we're going to approach this today. We're going to highlight kind of a couple of groups represented here that work together in the great state of Tennessee. There's some individuals we've worked closely with on some projects, but then we've also just kind of gotten word repeatedly over the last little while about some really, really impressive work that they're doing. And so we wanted to be able to highlight some of this work and hopefully present it in a way that will give our attendees an idea and a vision for things that they may be able to be doing and participating in your own areas as well. So with that, let me introduce our panelists. First of all, we are thrilled to have Emily Gill, stellar school counselor from Thurman Francis Arts Academy, just been honored as the 2022-2023 Tennessee School Counselor of the Year by the Tennessee School Counselor Association. No big deal. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Emily is accomplishing just amazing things, spearheaded a fantastic school counseling program, also making a significant positive impact in the community, district team leader, enlightened fellow counselors at state conferences, mentored graduate interns, also a pillar in the community, providing invaluable resources, support to parents, currently enhancing her expertise through an externship with Rutherford Works to further help students navigate post-high school plans. Thrilled to have you, Emily. Congratulations on your recent award, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. Glad to be here.
And Emily, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but I noticed you did have a guest earlier in your room.
Yeah,
with a guest doggo, maybe your assistant, but I love
my
seeing
assistant. He's fantastic.
What's his name?
Franklin.
All right, welcome Franklin as well.
Yeah, from Franklin County, Tennessee. I know we have some other Tennesseans on here, so that's why I say that. Rescued from Franklin County. But
Awesome.
Thank you. He's resting now, so hopefully.
Well, he's welcome. He's welcome back on the screen anytime he would like to.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dr. Tiffany Wilson. Tiffany has a wealth of experience under her belt, holding degrees in school counseling, rehabilitation counseling, currently shaping the minds of future counselors at Middle Tennessee State University, where she's the program coordinator for the professional counseling program. Also super involved with the Tennessee Department of Education, sitting on both the School Counselor Advisory Council and the Mental Health Collaborative Council. Takes on multiple roles for the Tennessee School Counselor Association, Director of Awards, Recognition, Scholarship, faculty coordinator of the School Counselor Collaborative, also an editor in the International Journal of the Whole Child, huge passion for mental health and the counseling profession. The list goes on, involved in a lot of stuff. And I think through all of that, if I remember right, has also kept a fairly steady stream of working with clients as well. Yes. Do I have that right? So
you
Tiffany, you are doing a million different things. Really appreciate you making time to join us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
And then last, certainly not least, is Amy Baltimore, currently rocking it as the elementary school counseling supervisor for Rutherford County Schools, fervent advocate for school counseling. Dedication is evident in roles on the Tennessee School Counseling Association board and as chair of the TSCA Advocacy Committee, also serving second year on the Department of Ed's School Counseling Advisory Board. Passion for school counseling took root early on, and you've lived about throughout the world, got some incredible life experience that I think has influenced probably your approach to school counseling and just your outlook on the world in general. Tireless advocate for students, championing trauma-informed practices and multi-tiered systems of support, bringing that rich experience and commitment to where you're at now. Amy, I've also had the luxury of being able to work personally with you on a few things, and have always been impressed with your vision for pulling big things together and really making it happen and getting all the people and the resources together in the room to make it happen. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here today.
And then I am Jason Johnson. I've been with the WhyTry organization for about 8 years. I am the director of training and research. Prior to that, I worked in public ed as a school psychologist, which is where I think my heart really lies. This has been such an incredible opportunity, though, to be able to kind of extend my my reach and my connection to be able to work with educators and mental health professionals throughout the country now. And I feel very fortunate to be able to be part of this this community. So I get the honor of leading out on these discussions. And so with that, I want to just jump right into it. Wondering if you can maybe tell us, let's just briefly tell us about your current role, organizations that you're part of, and what you've been focusing on for the last little while. Let's start with, let's go Emily, Tiffany, Amy.
So I have had a focus on like a safe, supportive school and like really the post-secondary. You mentioned the externship, the Rutherford Works externship. And then I really have a passion for small group counseling. So I would say that kind of sums up a lot of my focus.
Perfect. Tiffany.
Yeah, at MTSU, we are very proud of our program. Since COVID-19, our numbers have actually doubled and multiplied, which has been really odd but great at the same time. We have worked really hard at shaping our program to be trauma informed. And so in all of our classes, we make sure that our students are very well versed in trauma and what that means in crisis counseling and trauma informed practices. We also make sure our students are multiculturally competent when they leave, or try our best to make sure that they're well trained and versed in that as well, so they can work with anybody that is not like them. We think that is super important, especially this day and time. And then we also push wellness. It is hard being a counselor, whether you're a school counselor or whatever in the mental health field. Got to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And so we push those three different ideas to make sure that those are matriculated throughout every single class that our students take. We also pride ourselves on the PD we offer for school counselors and clinical mental health counselors. And then we also run a counseling center for the community where we only charge $10 a session.
I love it. Really impressive work. Thank you. Amy.
Well, I just want to say to Dr. Wilson, too, I love the work she's doing because my daughter starts at MTSU in the fall, and I'm so excited she'll be available, to kind of help in that transition. One of the things I think for me that has really stood out is that whole idea, and Jason, you alluded to this a little bit, about systems change and organizational change. So, the work in Rutherford County and the work in Tennessee as a whole, that has been largely my focus in the last couple of years, really working on the systems that we are putting in place, because people move, people change. But if our system is in place, the work can continue with the support that it needs. So looking at that at a local level and also at the state level with legislation that's being passed and lobbying and advocating for the role of school counseling at the state level. I had the opportunity this past session to actually write an amendment to a bill. Unfortunately, it didn't go through, but we'll try again next year. And also worked with another senator to write another bill supporting the role of school counselors and the ratios of school counselors to students in schools. So that's been my passion, is really working on the systems that are in place to support school counseling and to support students and families.
Awesome. Thank you. Really great intro. And I think it highlights one of the things I love about this particular panel that we have today is it represents, I think, three really important perspectives within the community. We have kind of the frontline school counselor approach. We have that administrative approach. And then we also have this kind of community support, but it's really a unique kind of type of community support that is involved in training PD, but also trying to assist on boards and influence some of those systemic pieces as well. And so I think there's three really important perspectives that I'm excited to hear more from. I am curious, some of you alluded to it a little bit, wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about some of the trends that you're currently seeing right now, specific to student mental health, because this has been an ongoing challenge, and I think we've seen certain trends become maybe more alarming over time. Realistically, this existed pre-COVID, but then I think COVID just put a real magnifying glass on some of these challenges. And now in this current era that we're in, we have the challenges that existed before. We then also have the challenges that were created or made worse during trying to deal with and navigate the COVID world. What are the mental health trends for students that you're seeing right now? Let's go Tiffany, Amy, and then Emily.
Yeah, so I know when I teach our internship students, the majority of them are actually working as full-time school counselors. And oh gosh, the things that we discuss in class, just the increase in anxiety, depression, aggressive behaviors, a lot more fighting, the stunted growth of just the emotional growth, the social growth, the behavioral growth, that students are kind of just stunted of wherever, COVID happened, that's where they currently are 2-3 years later. You're also just seeing a lack of engagement among students, those students who are not asking for help that can easily fall through the cracks. Students maybe have an issue in focusing in class, not knowing how to ask for help. And then also when we had that shooting that happened in Nashville at the Covenant School, oh, bless. I had a student that was like at a school that was 2 miles from the Covenant. And so she was dealing with students, and parents' fear of going to school. And so I just think it has been, for people who were kids who were struggling before, it is 100 times worse, I think, now. And we don't have the resources, right, to really support the students, the faculty. The faculty are experiencing the same things. I think people forget about the people that take care of the kids. They need support too. And I just think everybody's kind of struggling. So that's kind of what my students talked about or have been talking about for the past few years.
Thank you. Amy.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out kind of how to phrase this, but it has to do with neurodiversity and the way that we approach it in education. So I think, we talked a lot about academics and how, each student needs different things and accommodations for their learning. Well, that's one thing. What about with their mental health, And so there's kind of this thought movement, I guess, where people are finally realizing that, oh, wait a minute, we've got to meet this need first, and then we can go and deal with the learning. So that's kind of the biggest trend that I'm seeing, is that people are recognizing, okay, I've got to learn more about neurodiversity and how to meet those needs. So that's something that's really been interesting. And, Tiffany mentioned the anxiety. I mean, when we look at our data, it's through the roof. The amount of anxiety that teachers, families, and students are bringing to the table, it can get overwhelming.
Emily.
All right, so one of the first things I said was the importance about having safe schools, and then also having the supports in place for all students. And I'm so grateful to Dr. Wilson because, they're training graduate students who are a great help, like as we're working to get the ratios up, which I'm grateful to Amy for, because she's working on that front line for getting the legislature through to get more counselors per student in the general education classroom, the general ed student. Dr. Wilson has, well-trained graduate students coming in to help us counselors keep our heads above water and do the work and keep doing it, like keep wanting to stay in education and feel supported. So I thank both of them for that help. So one thing that was a surprise to me, when we returned in Tennessee, schools closed down March of 2020, and then the following school year we returned to hybrid. And for the first time ever, I had students who disclosed that they were having such severe eating disorders and had been diagnosed with eating disorders that they were needing school supports. And then the following year, even, like I've seen this for 2021 to 2022, I mean, I did not learn in graduate school how to support a student with an eating disorder. I went through a wonderful program, and I just don't remember that being part of it. Like, I probably needed to take on a special project to learn how to help, you know, a student having being diagnosed with an eating disorder. So that was something that surprised me, and I was learning on the job. And I remember in one case that there was a student who needed even a 504 plan, and I was going, okay, I need to learn how to write a 504 plan to support a student with anorexia. So yes, the data is there that students have anxiety and depression and self-harm at the middle school level. That was always a concern for me, but I did only see that increase. And then Amy in Rutherford County Schools trained us on using the ASQ, which I believe is probably common in other states as well. But I found that to be a very helpful tool to find at the school level the severity for getting like a
Hey, Emily, it may sometimes those may not be as common as you think. Would you mind, just in case somebody isn't aware, just clarifying what that acronym is?
Yeah. Amy, what does ASQ stand for?
Sorry, it's an assessment of a suicide questionnaire.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to put a link in the chat.
Thank
Perfect.
you. And so as a school counselor, I was able to use that assessment. Like, I felt like I was trained well enough, you know, through suicide prevention that we all go through in graduate school. It's not an overwhelming survey. The questions get really serious really fast, but I would just say, to wrap this up, that's the concern that we all saw was identifying the students that needed those supports. And that's, I think, a whole other conversation. And then finding like the level of response that was needed, and getting a safety plan, or, you know, helping the parents, you know, find a counselor, or just whatever the severity was, meeting the need.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for throwing that link in the chat as well, Amy.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of directions I thought about going kind of for the next part of the conversation. We can either start big, kind of big picture ideas, or we can start local, more specific. And I think I want to start with some of the big picture ideas, because I think that's been one of the things that's really impressed me with what you all have been able to do, is really kind of assemble systems and supports together to work in unison to really move towards a vision. And so I wondered if you could just each talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that you've been involved with, either at an administrative or at a facilitation standpoint. I know, like, one example that has come up in previous discussion has been like the Mental Health Collaborative Council for the Tennessee Department of Education, and some of the affiliation and organization around that. But just wondering if you could talk about some of the bigger initiatives that you've been a part of, and what some of those impacts have been. You know, what do they look like? What's the impact been? What did it take to get them going? Which I know is a lot, but I think it's an important part of the discussion, especially as these challenges continue to get seemingly more complex, more intense, and more wide-reaching. Let's go Amy, then Emily, and then Dr. Wilson.
Okay, well, Dr. Wilson and I are involved in a lot of similar projects, so I'll let her talk about kind of the Mental Health Collaborative and the bigger ones that are statewide, and then I'll discuss a little bit more about some of the ones that are kind of at the county level that are available throughout Tennessee, but they are connected to federal funding that is coming out of the Biden administration. And in the state of Tennessee, it's called the Tennessee Resiliency Project, and then that's broken down into different grants. So one of the grants that we were able to reach out and snatch up some dollars from was called the Resilient School Communities Grant. And our district was actually able to access the largest amount of funding for this year through the state of Tennessee. So we're really glad of that. And we've launched a district-wide program to really train distinct personnel in each school as a leadership team. And what we're doing is training those leaders to then train their staff. And just to give you an idea, we're the, if you include our city schools, we're the third largest district in the state of Tennessee. Middle Tennessee State University is the largest university in the state of Tennessee, and we're all right here south of Nashville. So what we're doing is we're training those staff in trauma-informed schools, and then they in turn are training their staff. We're training them in resilience for themselves, and then we're going to try to build on that year after year after year. So they have an assessment that they will do as a team at their building level. And that assessment kind of says, okay, we need more support in teacher self-care, or maybe we need to learn a little bit more about how to create safe spaces in our schools. And that training will just continue as the years go on, and they'll build on that action plan as the years go on. So in order to kind of keep that going and have it be sustainable, we're creating modules for training that new staff will be able to access. And we've partnered with WhyTry on some toolkits for transformational leadership. It's kind of a new project that we're working on. Jason can speak about that, but it's one of those things where we're trying to build up the capacity of our educators and our staff so that they can then in turn serve the students with more of an understanding of what they're coming to the table with. Right. So we know that they've been through toxic stress situations. We know that, you know, trauma has occurred in our students in the past 3 years, but then just in general with the changes in society and the different things. When you think about ACEs studies and all of that, we have students coming to us with multiple ACEs that we even know of. And so when you think about what we don't know of, you think of the iceberg, you know, what's under the water, there's so much there. And so equipping our staff and our faculty with the understanding of how they can approach the student, you know, even with not understanding what all they bring to the table, helping them build resilience. So that's one of the kind of big picture ideas, because that's pre-K through 12. These leadership teams will continue the training as the years go on, and they'll continue to assess themselves and their level of, you know, kind of implementation, and then what supports do they need in order to implement. So along with that grant, we've been able to dig up some other funding and, you know, offer the resources they need to then implement safe spaces, or establish what we're calling reset rooms in place of ISS, in school suspension, and just all these different things that we're doing at the district level. But this is also work that's going out through the state of Tennessee. So the other districts that are working toward these same goals, we meet together once a month. We share ideas, you know, we help each other with resources. So it's really become a statewide effort that has made a huge impact already.
Awesome. Just two quick notes. Sorry to keep putting some of you on the spot, but I want to make sure that some of these terms that get thrown out that are really helpful. In case anybody isn't aware, Amy, do you want to take a very brief explanation of what ACEs, what the ACEs assessment is?
Yes. Okay. So ACEs, I'm sorry. And I saw a couple of your faces like, what? All right. So that's adverse childhood experiences. And I'll throw in the chat again a link to that. But basically it's when, you know, a child or an individual under the age of 18 experiences that they have in their life that expose them to traumatic experiences, and it's based on their perception of it as well. So basically it's, well, for an example, you have a parent that is somehow died and is no longer in their life. Well, how were they able to become resilient in that moment or not? And if their perception of that was, nope, that was a traumatic event for me, I had no support, this has been a lifelong toxic stress situation for me, then that is labeled as an adverse child childhood experience. And I could go on and on about, there's so much more to it.
No, that's
Um,
perfect. I just wanted to make sure. And then, yeah, if you have a link, that'd be awesome. ACES is kind of the gold standard. If any of our attendees are unfamiliar with it, it's a really good, really effective tool for being able to really identify what individuals have these events that may be impacting how they're responding right now. I've even worked with districts that have used ACEs with their faculty as well, because it turns out that a lot of faculty also have these experiences from their past that may be impacting how they engage with challenging situations right now. And so it's a really, really useful tool. And I love that you mentioned it. The other thing, just a quick clarification on, as far as the assessment tool, you said that your buildings are using, did you all develop that yourself? Is that kind of a homegrown assessment, or what are you using for that, for your building administrators to do internal assessment?
Yeah, so this was part of the training that comes from the Department of Ed in the state of Tennessee. I mean, I can link it. I can throw that in there too, so you can take a look at it, because it's
People
all,
love the links. They
Yeah,
show up
okay.
because they're really interested to see what other people are doing.
It's all in the Tennessee.gov. So I'll send it to you.
Awesome, thank you, Emily. While Amy's pulling that up, tell us a little bit about your experience, kind of engaging with some of the initiatives. What it's been like for you on the front lines.
Yes, so Amy just explained a lot of how we went through the Building Strong Brains training. This has been a really big deal because we had a team that was chosen by the administrator who was going to be on this team. And then at least in my experience, I hope in most schools, and then like Amy was saying, every school in Rutherford County, pre-K through 12, has a team. So this is a really big deal. So the way I've experienced this on the front line is that as a part of the team, so I'm feeling really supported by teachers, instructional coach, my principal. We are going back and re-delivering the training to our colleagues at school. So we have started doing this. It's the trauma-informed training, Building Strong Brains. And then we're going to follow up in the fall with more in depth. We didn't want to overwhelm everyone towards the end of the school year. So we kind of gave them like, here's what ACEs are. Here are examples of ACEs. And then I gave like a little, I was grateful for this because I had a moment to say, you know, as you're wrapping up this school year and thinking of next year's class, your incoming students, keep in mind what events may happen for them between the end of May and the beginning of August, or what things have already happened for your students and what we may not even know about, like the iceberg. So yeah, so we're redelivering it. And then I think it's just a really huge deal for the school counselor to feel supported, that we're not doing this work on our own, that there's a general understanding of the need for mental health supports in supporting the whole child.
Awesome, thank you. Dr. Wilson.
Yes. So from my perspective, I work a lot, as you mentioned, with the Tennessee Department of Education. And me and Amy, I think we're just about on every single committee together. But with the School Counseling Advisory Council, that has been really fun. I'm working with that committee to help rewrite our standards. In 2019, ASCA updated their standards. And so Tennessee, we're in the process of revamping our standards and seeing actually what the current needs are of school counselors across our state, because our state is so, when I first moved here, I was like, oh my gosh, it's like 3 different states in one. So hello to all my North Carolina people, because that's where I'm from. But it's the needs are very diverse in this state. And so having this council really helps us to determine how to meet those needs in an effective way. So that's the School Counselor Advisory Council. For the Mental Health Collaborative Council, that has been an amazing opportunity for so many mental health professionals to come together. So that group includes school counselors, school social workers, school psychologists, school nurses. Anybody who deals with school-based mental health practices is on this committee. And then we also just connect with other mental health organizations that are for the children, and want to support our work and what we do for K-12 students. So we just held our first conference on May 5th, which was really amazing. We had people talk about play therapy, cognitive behavioral supports in school, how to heal trauma through relationships, through healthy relationships. First time we had 138 people show up in person for our very first conference, which was absolutely amazing. And so that was, I'm really excited to be part of that group. And then Project Raise, that's a grant, a federal grant that Tennessee Department of Education got. I serve as the school counseling consultant for that grant. The cool thing about that grant, we are trying to increase the number of school counselors, school social workers, and school sites in rural schools in Tennessee. And so far we have reached our max numbers for school counselors and school social workers. We're still working on school sites. So if you know anybody who's interested in rural Tennessee, free tuition for their last year in the program, tell them to come on. We got some openings. And so those are kind of the initiatives that we're working on to get the word out about mental health, to continue to break down the stigma of mental health, particularly in the rural areas, and just help get resources and connections out there, and then help connect people who are like-minded, and just get us together. Because once I find people like Amy, like Emily, I'm like, let's go. We got to stick together and grow our bubble. And so that's really the fun part of these different initiatives that's going on from the state perspective.
Awesome. Thank you. Now, I had a feeling this was going to happen a little bit, because this is a powerhouse group of go-getters, and we are throwing out a lot of ideas, terms, programs. We're going to link as much as we can in the chat. And then just for everybody's information, we're going to put up email addresses of our panelists at the end as well. And so if you want to follow up on anything that you've heard, we can really only scratch the surface within our hour here, but hopefully something you hear will get you excited or get you interested in something that maybe you can try to work towards more in your local area. And so we want you to be able to get those. We can even get a collection of links. I'll send an email out to our panelists after, and we can try to collect any links that may have been thrown together, put them in a single email, and send a follow-up email out as well. But yeah, we want to make sure you get those. I'm curious, one of the things that has come up regularly, and by the way, that was part of what Amy shared, I think is one of the recent things we got to work on organizationally with them. We came in conjunction with part of one of these initiatives to come in and do this transformational leadership training that Amy mentioned. And that's all about one of the key protective factors when it comes to adolescent resilience is the presence of a caring adult. That's kind of like the foundational piece of the beginning parts of resilience. And then our approach is we break resilience down into a specific set of skills and a specific set of sources of resilience. But the center point, the starting point for us is always focusing on the student-teacher, student-counselor relationships. And so we have this transformational leadership toolkit, and Amy really had kind of a unique vision for utilizing this for us to be able to come in and train these leadership teams that she mentioned on our approach and our language specifically to relationships, and very specifically to creating relationships environments where we as the adults can try to establish ourselves as a caring adult kind of within our kiddos environment. And then that becomes kind of the foundational piece for the next steps of resilience to start to grow from that. But it also becomes a really great piece for transforming kind of culture and climate within buildings as well. And that's where, we describe it as that transformational leadership piece, because we start to see student motivation and that type of thing impacted from it. But it was, when we were out there, it was so impressive to see kind of all of these pieces. We were just one piece within the puzzle that Amy, and so I think hopefully you're starting to hear some of that from our panelists, how they're kind of bringing and coordinating all these pieces together and putting them together to try to support their kiddos. It's really, really impressive. I'm wondering if we could stay on this theme of relationships a little bit. Talk about I think the influence you're seeing relationships have, what impact that has within trauma-informed models. I know you've done some work with restorative practices models as well. Where do you value the relationship? Maybe that's too obvious of a question. So maybe a better question would be, what are you doing to be more intentional or bring more intentionality around the relationship piece? Because I think it's a common element most educators, mental health professionals agree on, but it seems to be a thing that is kind of easy to lose intentionality around just because we have so many boxes we need to check. So I'm wondering if you could maybe discuss your what your approach to relationships has been and what impact you see that having on your kiddos and your adult facilitators. Let's go, Emily.
All right.
Tiffany, Amy.
Okay. I love talking about building relationships with students because I do see it as being such a cornerstone of the work. And so I think one thing I want to make sure to say is that I'm grateful for the team that I have because it doesn't have to be me. I have no problem saying that. I love building relationships with students. It usually comes naturally and easily, but if I think that a student has a need and maybe I'm just not quite getting it, like maybe there's something about what makes them tick, what their interests are, and I'm just never going to quite be the person for them to talk about race cars with, then I'm going to find the person in the building that they do connect with, the person who they can help with technology, engineering, hands-on things. So I think that's an important part to remember is that as strong as school counselors are in building relationships, that it doesn't have to be us. We can, help them find the other person. I like giving examples. So I think of a student who came to me when both of his parents were deployed, working in serving in the military. And so what made him really special and unique is that he kept a notebook where he wrote down every adult in the building that he knew cared about him. All right. And this was he was if not upper elementary, maybe 6th grade. No, actually, no, he was upper elementary at this time. And so both of his parents are back in the States now, but he knew who he could go to. At the time, I was itinerant. I had 2 schools where I was working. And so if I wasn't there one day, he knew the person in the cafeteria he could go to talk to. He had his, when he was younger in elementary school, his teacher that could be a check-in person for him, his related arts teacher that he was really close with. So it's just really important for kids to know that they are cared for. It is important if they think that they maybe have experienced or witnessed bullying or harassment or are concerned that someone might, do violence, that they need to know that they have caring, supportive adults in their life at school to go to and disclose these things to. It's important. And it usually comes down to small talk and interests and them seeing that you really care about them.
Awesome. Thank you. Great example. Dr. Wilson.
So this is probably my number one favorite thing to talk about just in counseling as a whole. I value relationships and the power relationships bring. And so I'm very intentional. I always tell students that every single person that works in the school has the power to help heal trauma because it takes nothing to be kind and to connect with people and never to let anybody, and anybody can do it. My favorite people in the building were always the custodians because I worked I was a high school counselor. And so what was going on in the hallways or what we call the streets, the custodians always knew. And so if we needed a check-in, check-out person, I could always ask the custodians to be a part of that and to help bring them into the community, the school community as a whole. And so I just, as Emily was saying, I think that is probably the most critical thing that every person in the building can do. And the most important thing I think every single person needs to do. As from a faculty perspective, I always too want to make sure that the future school counselor has their hearts prepared as well. We know that we need to connect with children, but I also want to make sure that school counselors are able to connect with other people themselves. And so just from my perspective, I try to make sure that they not only work on how to do the restorative justice circles with students, but do it with each other as faculty, because you're going to work with people who you may not like, who you may not get along with, you may have an argument with, but that doesn't mean that the relationship can't be repaired. That doesn't mean that forgiveness can't happen. And so we need to make sure that we teach the adults, right, how to have healthy relationships as well. And I always just like to tell my story because relationships is how I really got into the field anyway. Because back in 2006, a drunk driver drove through my house in the middle of the night, and it was about a month before me and my husband got married. And so if it wasn't for his relationship, because I wasn't the same person, of course, he had dated for 2 years that he married. And I always say, if it wasn't for his relationship and his kindness and just patience with the PTSD that I experienced, I don't think I would have gotten successfully through that process. And so as an adult, I'm grateful for that support. And I can imagine as a child having, trauma and how much love and support that they would need if they don't have that. And so relationships are very important to me. And I intentionally teach about that in every single class to make sure that my students know that students need it, but also as future school counselors, they need it as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for sharing your story as well. I love how you described that, that's the thing anybody can do. And it really is, we'll have time. I'm going to ask a question here in a minute about kind of some more specifics, but, if somebody's looking for a starting point for just how to try to help improve mental health in your space and you don't know where to start by becoming more intentional with your relationships, and then see if you can create a local kind of collective or team of fellow educators, facilitators that are equally focused on it. Make that the starting point, and it will create a foundation that you can build from that has a direct impact on mental health. Awesome endorsement. Amy.
Well, I might just kind of segue for you here because
please do.
I do talk a lot about like systems and big change and this and that, but really what brought me to that was one girl. And, when I was older teenager, I was 17 years old, but I was living in Romania and serving with an orphan foundation. And this was, in the early 90s, and we were doing a lot of work with helping the children in the orphanages reconnect with either someone in their actual blood relative family or a home where they could receive care. And they were, when I talk about children in trauma, these were children who grew up under communism and they were forced out of their homes into these state orphanages and basically exposed to trauma after trauma after trauma, the worst that you can imagine. And for years, this is their life, and they're living on the streets doing whatever they can to survive. So we're taking these kids and we're taking them out to the mountains and into nature, and it's Romania. Who speaks Romanian? We have all these people coming to help us. They can't speak the language, so really struggling to help. But honestly, all it took was presence, right? And this unconditional positive regard, or dare I say, unconditional love. You're just there, not judging them, not in any way trying to change them, just being present with them. And there was one girl that for 2 weeks, she just wouldn't leave my side. And we didn't talk much. We just were together and we did everything together. And after the course of about 7 days, the scales fell from her eyes and she just started to become this brighter being, more safe, more able to relate because she knew that she had someone that she could trust. So it starts with one. And I think that a lot of times we're like, what do we do? What do we do? Just be, And that's the key to help starting the process of healing the trauma.
I love it. Thanks for all of you for sharing your stories on that. By the way, fellow 90s kid here as well.
Yeah.
That was also a nice Carl Rogers reference as well, a little client-centered therapy. I love it. It reminded me, I couldn't help but think of, but one of the things that fundamentally changed how I did one-on-one counseling as a school psych. When you talk about just the power of presence, I had a student that came in after a really problematic situation. They were kind of like banished to my room, and I was a very young, very green school psychologist. I was supposed to like fix the situation, and this kiddo wouldn't talk. He was not selective mute, but he wouldn't talk. And finally, I exhausted like all the things I learned in graduate school. It took me, I think, 7 minutes to try everything that I could think of from my graduate school that I paid for. And finally, out of desperation, I handed him my computer, my laptop, opened up to YouTube and said, just play me a song that tells me how you're feeling. You don't have to say a word. And he did it. And I knew what he was going to do. He played a very intentionally abrasive song. And I sat with him and was just present, just listening to a song that he picked. And then rather than talk back, I said, can I play a song for you now? Because if there's one thing I did know at that point in time in my life, it was music. I was obsessed with it. And that became our thing. And it turned into this practice that I would do with kiddos that didn't necessarily want to talk. I would always just give them the opportunity. We don't have to say a word today, but we have to exchange emotion and be present with one another somehow. And we would just practice listening to one another's song. And it became this really powerful avenue. Just the light bulb went off when you were talking, Amy, just to be present with a kiddo in the moment. And those were the kiddos that were really difficult for other grownups in my building to work with, but they would work for me. And I know it was because we had just established that relationship. That was really kind of my turning point. We might go about 5 minutes over. I hope that's okay, but this is an important discussion. So I want to hear, I'm going to combine two questions. You can choose to answer both or just one or the other. We've talked about a lot of big ideas, and my guess would be there's probably some people on here listening going, I love what I'm hearing. I don't think there's any way I could get my state or my district or my school to organize itself to the extent that you all have, because this sometimes I think can sound a little bit overwhelming because there's all these moving parts and there's leadership with clear vision that is working nicely with other people in the same sandbox. I'm curious, two things I'm wondering if you could address. Number one, any ideas or strategies for just where a person can start right now? I'm feeling overwhelmed. I want to help try to support better positive mental health support with my kiddos right now in my space. I love what I'm hearing, but it sounds overwhelming. What could I do right now? Also, do you have any ideas for helping to create better buy-in right now with individuals around me that, if I could get some stakeholders, key stakeholders to buy in or to understand this a little bit better? Answer either or both. Let's start with Dr. Wilson, then we'll go Amy, then we'll go Emily.
Sure. I think one of the biggest things is being active in your profession. And that's a great way to get connected with people who are interested in the same thing you are. And so I do encourage, especially my students, to get involved in state organizations, get involved with national organizations, because that way, when you go to conferences or join affinity groups or whatever the organizations offer, it can help connect and grow your circle. And those connections are so incredibly valuable, and they're super powerful, and it keeps that fire burning inside of you that, if you're the only one, it helps keep that fire burning to make some changes happen. I think gathering data on what you want to change so that you can see, okay, this is what the issue is. This is what needs to change, because I had one principal tell me, you just do fluffy stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute, no, I don't. I don't do fluffy stuff. But I had to figure out how to communicate in their language, right? And so that's data. So I think understanding who makes the decisions and what they value and how to communicate that what you're doing as a school counselor, this, if you let me do my job, you know, I can make your world so much better in this school. And then I think just continue to stay educated on current trends, on what's happening in your school, in your district, at the state level and at the national level. You have to make sure that you are prepared to express any information that's needed at the time. So definitely continue to educate yourself on interventions and things of that nature, just to make sure that you are well versed in whatever issue you're trying to tackle.
Thank you. Let's go. I think next we had Amy and then Emily.
Well, I really just ditto everything that she just said. The best way to advocate for moving something along is collecting that data and showing people how it impacts the dollars. Data equals dollars. And that's how you're going to get people to come on board. If you can show them how it impacts student learning, which then in turn impacts the cost of learning and or not, and all of that. I mean, that's huge. But the other thing is really just brush up on your training, get certified in different things so that you can then offer professional development from a professionally secure and credible place. So one of the things is mental health first aid for youth. That's huge. If you can get certified as a trainer in that, and it really, I don't think it costs anything except some of your time, of course, but that is one of the things that can really get you on the ground floor of having something in your back pocket that, one, you understand, and two, you can bring forward as something to help others build their capacity. So that I suggest that just really brush up on training yourself and then being able to offer that training to others.
Thank you. If you, no pressure, we can track it down after, but if you by chance can find a link for that mental health first aid for youth, I think that would be greatly appreciated. Emily.
Yes. So, yes, the data, and I know data can feel overwhelming. Because I've grown each year in the use of data to promote and to promote my program, show what me and my co-counselor were doing. And I love to put up this poster during National School Counseling Week. And I remember my assistant principal, the first year I did it, she was like, well, that's fantastic. And then she turned to like an instructional coach and was like, why don't y'all do that to help explain what you do in our school? And I was like, oh, but no, I love that tool. So data really does speak your admin's language. And, I could say a lot more to that, but it basically helps you have a piece of the pie. When you can say this student showed growth and you were like, okay, yes, they were getting this support and this support, but also they were in my small group, because I'm passionate about small group counseling, then you get a piece of the pie. You can say some of this came from an intervention I was providing. And then, okay, so music. I loved, Jason, your example of music, because I remember learning great interventions in class, and I remember learning like using art when I was in graduate school. And then it was when I was interning at a middle school and leading a grief small group that I don't even know where the idea came from, because a lot of times I don't reinvent the wheel. I learned from other counselors, but I had the students share a song that meant something to them and the person who had died. And that was like one of the most powerful small group counseling sessions I've ever led or experienced. It was just so moving. And I see a lot of you saying, yes, music is just so powerful. It simply is. It reaches across demographics and gets into the soul. So going along with other things you can do when your student does not want to talk, whether they are elementary, middle, high school. So I said music, art, sand tray. You can use a dry erase board. I've used social emotional learning videos where we watch it together, and then there are little like built-in quizzes, and note writing, journals and note writing. I've had students that I would write like kind of like check-ins, but it didn't require me to be available. And we would write these notes back and forth. So, oh, and I love bibliotherapy. So I keep a good library, and I'll say, hey, do you want this book or this book? You know, I'll kind of have an idea because I have students use an online referral. So I'll know their primary reason for requesting to meet with me, and I'll say this book or this book, and then they have a choice, and then I can read it to them, and then maybe they'll want to talk a little bit. So I love ideas that don't require the student to really like just share all the thoughts and feelings, because you have limited time for solution focused short-term counseling. And these are some of the initiative, you know, the interventions that I found to be most helpful.
I love it. Yeah, I just thinking as you were talking, you've all have flooded my brain with memories. Silly putty, thinking putty, Play-Doh, kind of all right in the same line. Really, you know, anything you can use to get a kiddo kind of engaging and expressing. My thoughts, it was interesting as you all started talking, when I was thinking about my own approach to buy-in, my mind went to data as well. And I think that can be kind of a boring and maybe even frustrating answer to hear sometimes, but there's real value in it. And in reality, I've had an aha moment listening to you. You know, as adults, one of the things we're trying to teach our kiddos, especially in a mental health setting, is how to advocate for themselves, right? But sometimes as educators, we're not great at advocating for ourselves. And data becomes, I think, a really valuable resource for advocating for yourself. You know, it's the old adage, if it's not documented, then it didn't happen. And unfortunately, within organizations and institutions, that is kind of real. The documentation is the evidence, and that's what admin certainly needs. I don't know if I should tell this story or not, but I'm gonna. Oh, that means I have to now. Early on, I was at a high school, and there was some challenges we had in the high school that we needed district support for, and I didn't feel like we were getting district support. And I would submit my reports, and we would get very tepid, very mild, very mediocre intervention recommendations or support. And I would get it. And I remember I would talk to the special ed teacher or the life skills teacher, and we would literally just like be grabbing our heads going, are they serious? Is this the solution that's being proposed? And one of the things that really fundamentally helped, and I think it is part of keeping data, it's also how you present your data. I had to start changing how I wrote my reports. And early on, I was maybe a little bit too timid, and I would write these watered down reports of what had happened. And I started writing a little bit more graphic reports. And I remember the first one that I wrote, I was like, it was kind of an anger report, right? It was a frustration anger report, but I was like, you know what? I'm putting it all in there. I am not editing any words. I am presenting it as unfiltered as possible. Yoink, turned it in, and I got a call within an hour. And the director said, well, that was a pretty intense report that you sent over. And I said, yeah. And he goes, wow, I'm not used to reading that kind of language at him. And I said, yeah. And guess what? They got us the right support that we needed. But it was a lesson to me on not just the value of data, but the importance of presenting it well, but also advocating on behalf of ourselves well, because it's a vital piece. So anyway, thank you for letting me remember. We need to wrap up. Do any of you have any parting thoughts or strategies that you didn't get out yet that you want to share before I give you your last brief question? Okay, if not, final question, and I'm going to put up a link with email addresses, and here we go. I'm going to put up a link with contact information, email addresses, as well as a QR code. Here's the final question. Tell me what's giving you hope right now. What's got you hopeful? Because we've got a lot of challenges. It's a tough time to be in the world of education and mental health. And I always want to end on a positive note because I think there's a lot to be really hopeful about. Let's go. Amy, Emily, Dr. Wilson. Amy, what's giving you hope right now?
Well, I can only speak for the state of Tennessee, really, and what, my experience. But what's giving me hope is that when the challenges are presented to our mental health professionals in education, they are rising and they are ready. They want to do the things to increase student and staff resilience, to meet our students where they are, to really self-assess and do the work to become better and to grow as the professionals that they are. So that is what is giving me hope, because, when I came into this position and this work, I saw a lot of work that needed to be done, and it really blossomed. And that gives me hope that people are ready for this. They are meeting the challenge with, fully armed and ready to go. And that's exciting.
Awesome. Thank you. Emily.
I would say something that gives me hope is that it does seem like we're hearing more discussion around the topic of trauma. It seems like we're hearing it more in, the news or just in our media. So I just wanted to say that I'm grateful, for recognition that it's real, and that also, like, our young people do give me hope. I like to talk about the positive with our young people, and I really love when I'm delivering lessons on bullying prevention and how to be safe, and that covers a lot of things. And when students are learning how to recognize when something is not safe, or when someone needs to be supported and they're being an upstander, I really love celebrating them being a good example to their peers.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. Wilson.
Wow. So things that give me hope, I would say, are definitely my students. I absolutely adore my students. I love teaching them, the heart that they bring to the profession, and just that drive to learn and want to help kiddos be successful. That excites me. Being able to collaborate with like-minded people, I think, gives me hope that I'm not by myself. And so that is an amazing feeling that, okay, there's other people that see what I'm seeing and that want to change and want better for our kids. And then I think the last thing is gives me hope is that the stigma of mental health is decreasing, particularly in minority communities. I think that is one thing that I'm loving, that I'm seeing more and more, that people are willing to go to counseling. People are willing to recognize it in different cultures. And so that gives me hope that, you know what, we're doing some great work out here.
I love it. Absolutely. I think we're making great progress. For me, it's my opportunity to connect with other individuals, similar to what Dr. Wilson said. When you can connect with people that share the same passion. I was just out, I'll shout them out by name, I don't mind. I was in Lexington, Kentucky the last 2 days working with a group called New Vista Mental Health Services. They had me out to do some trainings, some resilience trainings. And one of the things that really gave me hope at this stage in my career, I met some people that are in the early stage of their career, and they are so excited and they're so innovative. And in some cases, they see the world different than I do. And it is awesome. And they are doing and going to do great things. And the reminder, the thing that made me walk away so excited about was, it just reminded me that the best humans in the world are still being attracted to this field, despite all the challenges, that we've talked about. We're at unprecedented times right now. And we still have incredible humans that are getting into this. And I'm just so grateful to be able to connect with all of you, because I can consider everybody on this that's tuned into this webinar as either a panelist or attendee, part of that crew it continues to inspire me and give me hope. So anyway, thank you all. Hey, we need to conclude. We've surpassed our hour. Let's give a huge virtual round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much for bringing your passion, for bringing your heart, and for bringing and being willing to share your ideas and your experiences. You're doing great work out there. The state of Tennessee and really the community at large is really lucky to have you. They all mean it when they share their email address. If you have any follow-up questions, please reach out. If you're interested in a follow-up on any of the initiatives or programs that were discussed, please send an email. We have recorded this, and we will get a link out. It should be up hopefully by Monday at the latest. So if there was something on here you want to share with colleagues that weren't able to tune in, please do. Otherwise, we always appreciate you showing up. We look forward to our next one and having you back for that. Go have a great weekend, everybody. Hope you're having a good summer, recharging your batteries, do something great. And I am going to play us out